we've often heard the line about Australian products being higher quality than cheaper imports, but I suppose one of the questions we might first ask, is that really true? We've heard it, it's been said a million times, but is it true? And if so, what is it that drives higher quality? It would seem that we have three reasons we can claim Australian products are of high quality. The first being the higher quality and safety standards right from the start. Manufacturers are required to meet some of the highest quality and safety standards anywhere in the world. We also have better labelling laws. We've got strict laws about what you can and what you can't say on your labels, and it includes mandatory information, for example, country of origin, and also claims you're able to make about the benefits of a product. Well, you can't put something out and say this is going to cure cancer. You can't do that. And if you do, you'll find yourself in all sorts of legal trouble. We also have a highly skilled workforce in key manufacturing areas. The Australian manufacturing workforce is considered world-class and is highly regarded across automotive and aerospace, as well as metalworking, advanced composites, plastics, and even high-tech sectors like nanotechnology and advanced electronics. So we say, well, okay, everything seems to be in place, so what's actually going wrong? Well, Steve Eagle is the man for sourcing goods and a co-founder of How to Buy Australian Made. In some respects, what we're talking about there, Steve, thanks very much for joining us on the program too. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Are we talking about some sort of utopia? We can agree with all of that, but have we failed to almost talk about the proverbial elephant in the room, and that is the cost of manufacturing in Australia, which is expensive? We could, for example, look at the Germany and what they've done. They've created a premium product, which purchases of that product, if we take cars, for example, we've got the BMW, the Mercedes, the Audi. These are premium motor cars for which people expect to pay a premium price. So cost isn't so much of a factor. If you're manufacturing in various different sectors what you might describe as everyday goods, then cost becomes a factor, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And it's a really good point that you raise. The three areas that you highlighted before about higher quality, better labelling laws, and the highly skilled workforce that Australia has are really strong pillars of Australian manufacturing, if you like. And the cost is something that's always comes back as a point of discussion. I guess the good news is that in this year in particular, with all the craziness that's happened around the coronavirus situation, what's actually happened in the business world and in terms of manufacturing is a big realization that Australia needs better support with their manufacturing and delivering Australian products to Australian consumers. So how does this play out in this question that you explain as cost? Well, it's actually been studied. This year, the Institute of Australia ran a study, and what they did with their study is they investigated what they call future work. And in the study, what they discovered was that even with the higher rates of labour in Australia and the higher land rates and these sort of things that build up the cost of a manufactured part or a manufactured product, even with those costs accounted for, what they found is that Australia is actually competitive. And the reasons for that are actually pretty interesting. If you have a look at what's been going on in Asia, which is by far Australia's biggest competitor globally in terms of product sales, in Asia, and let's speak about China, it's obviously a huge player in Asia, the cost of labour, as an example, in China has doubled in the last 8 years. So where these low-cost countries were maybe really competitive sort of through the 80s and the 90s, what we're seeing in the last sort of 5 to 8 years is actually a reversal of that trend, where those cheaper economies are actually accelerating their standard of living. That drives a cost with that as well in terms of manufacturing and product. And now, really in the environment that we're in at the moment with the coronavirus, the Australian government's woken up to this. And it's not only a national security issue. The Australian government's identified that we need to have better control of our supply chain. And the cost question that you raise has been answered. That's been studied and looked at, and it accounts for about 13% of a product cost. So it's not that much.
Why have we seen so much stuff go overseas if that's the case? And if what you're talking about, which I accept as being true, if that is indeed the case, why haven't we seen more of a return? The reason being that a lot of stuff being offshored in many different areas, service industry is a really good example, it just drives people insane.
Yet, it's really interesting, isn't it?
They just don't wake up to it. They don't stop and go, this drives people insane. Just something like calling an overseas call centre with somebody who's got a strong accent that you can barely understand, who doesn't know anything about what you're speaking of. They haven't got a clue. They're simply reading off an idiot card. Seriously, how long, Steve, does it take people to wake up and realise that's actually really, really bad for business?
It really is, and I'm glad that you bring that up. You know, the realization, I think, has really been in 2020. I think the broader impact of the coronavirus has made people, and when I say people, I'm talking about business owners in Australia, manufacturers in Australia, the politicians in Australia at all levels, the council level, the state level, the federal level. It's really made these people sort of sit back and go, hang on, are the behaviours that we're used to making sense for Australian businesses and Australian consumers? So it's really pulled this whole question into context, and I think really what we're seeing is a reversal of that perspective. So even in the last 3 months, we had Scott Morrison in the paper saying that the coronavirus has created a philosophical change in his party, and this is the Prime Minister of Australia saying that their political party needs a philosophical change around how they view manufacturing, and off the back of that, a whole lot of government support's been announced to help businesses and individuals, move through this moment that we're in, but then also to incentivize further growth as well.
Is this a pipe dream, or do you believe it's reality?
I absolutely believe it's reality, but it needs to start in the right way. And the right way for manufacturing to come back to Australia happens at the consumer level and at the micro business level. So while the government is handing out grants and funding and resources for bigger industries and bigger business, really if you look at the economy, what's driving the Australian economy and what's growing at the moment is online businesses and small to medium-sized enterprises. That counts for more than...
We need to be able to export, don't we? Because we look at Australia. Australia per se is a very, very small market. Realistically, if we're going to manufacture, we also have to have a strong export component. Arguably, that was one of the problems with our car industry. It was simply manufacturing for the Australian market. 2/3 of the world couldn't buy our cars because the steering wheel's on the wrong side. But that was a real problem because we were a small market and we couldn't export to some of the larger markets. And I think that any manufacturing we do, we have to be realistic enough and say, we're doing this. Are we going to be able to export to the larger markets?
Yes, you're exactly right. And the good news on that side of the things is that Australia has a fantastic quality reputation. You might remember in the media just a couple of years ago where Chinese consumers were actually walking into Australian retail stores and buying baby formula to send back home. The reason that they were doing that is because of the quality of the baby formula that they could access back at home, right? So they're paying Australian retail prices because of the quality. And I think if Australian businesses and manufacturers understand that, then the opportunity for export is actually very good. In terms of accessing the market, Asia has 51% of the global population. There is absolutely no reason why Australian businesses can't create great quality products and export to Asia or export to other markets like India and even the traditional markets of America and Europe, carrying that high quality message.
Asian countries, they're effectively in our hood, aren't they?
Yes, I'm going to say something now that might upset a few people, but it's something that I've been saying for decades now, and that is the sooner Australia realizes that we're in an Asian community, I think it's actually a good thing for Australia because they're actually the consumers that would benefit from the high quality that Australia has. Now, we truly have world-class standards, as you alluded to earlier, the labelling laws and the workforce, the skill that we have, and the way that our government trades in the region is very good. What we need is consumers to realize that, and small businesses, manufacturers, online sellers, that strata of business can really leverage that opportunity to sell into Asia and really do well out of being a quality Australian product.
Steve Eagle, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us on Perth tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.